Hi, I'm Binali. I'm representing the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, which is popularly known as AVPN. The population of India's cities and will grow by 590 million by 2030, which is going to be representing 40% of the India's total population. The 6 largest states in India, largely Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Karnataka and Punjab are going to see a lot of social and environmental challenges increasing exponentially. Now, more than ever, we need to ensure that we are driving Indian philanthropy to be a part of these solutions for all of these cities in India, beginning with these 3. Today, we are elated and very proud to be associating ourselves with Dasra on this partnership where we'll be announcing and driving Indian philanthropy through these 3 cities, which of course Megha will tell you more about.
Thank you. And so we're very excited to announce a strategic partnership with AVPN, like Binali said, which is going to focus on nurturing a strategic philanthropy community in Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities. We'll start with Pune, Jaipur, and Chandigarh. As Binali mentioned, AVPN has built a vibrant community of 500 members across Asia. With Dasra's Philanthropist Education Program and Giving Circles, we are very confident that we'll be able to expand this community of philanthropists to be able to achieve the impact across India.
I think what's interesting is Dasra, right from the Dasra Giving Circle, had actually shown a model where you can hold the philanthropists both accountable and not see working in the sector as transactional. And I think this panel here will be able to talk to that and the importance of collaborative philanthropy. And I'd like to invite Safeena Husain from Educate Girls, and she'll introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you.
So before we even introduce the panelists, I very quickly wanted to get a sense of, and I'm sure all of you have heard a lot about collaborative philanthropy, but how many of you actually either fund or receive collaborative philanthropy? Just put your hands up so we can just see. Okay, so not very many people in the room. So then we'll try and get into some of the specifics of what would bring you to the table. And how many of you actually really have a good sense of what collaborative philanthropy actually would involve? I mean, the definition. Any kind of, all right, perfect. So that'll be the baseline of our panel. And very quickly to introduce you to the panelists, first and foremost, we have Amira Shah Chhabra. She is the director of Harish and Bina Shah Foundation, which integrates the Shah family's personal philanthropy with their business CSR. She leads operations and decision-making, and manages a portfolio of nearly 20 nonprofits with financial and advisory support. They cover areas everywhere from healthcare, disability, education, livelihoods, gender equity, empowerment, and governance across India. And before joining the foundation, Amira worked with the portfolio team at Dasra. So you're at home here. And led on capacity building support for selected organizations. And she has a master's in pharmacy from University of Nottingham, England. Welcome. Aleem Jivraj is our second panelist. He is the board of director for Empower, which is the Emerging Markets Foundation in Hong Kong. It's a global philanthropy organization focused on at-risk youth in emerging market countries in Asia. And they support close to 40 organizations across 5 countries, including India, funding education, livelihoods, healthcare. And their model encourages collaboration between grantee partners, facilitated via learning exchanges globally, and their Girls Advisory Council in India. Aleem is the Chief Operating Officer for Nomura's global markets business across Asia, excluding Japan. And he graduated from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania in economics. Welcome. And we have Arvind Balasubramanian. Arvind is General Manager Programs at Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives, where he anchors the function that supports nonprofit partners in their journey to build their organizations. Previously, he worked on an INR 300 crore multi-sectoral initiative to reduce malnutrition in Odisha. And before this, he spent 11 years in consulting with Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Tata Consultancy Services, and many others. And at PricewaterhouseCoopers, he was part of government transformation team, which looked at leveraging technology to improve service delivery across public procurement. And he has an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow. Welcome, Arvind. So with that, I actually wanted to start, because Educate Girls, has been part of the Dasra family. I mean, we're 11 years old, and I think most of that time we've been part of the Dasra family. And we started with collaborative philanthropy. So we'll hear a lot more from the donor perspective of what collaborative philanthropy is. But before that, I thought in terms of context setting, I could start just from Educate Girls and what collaborative philanthropy has really meant to us. We started with 500 schools. Today we work in 26,000 schools across Rajasthan and MP. To put that in context, Kenya has 26,000 schools. So it's huge scale, and a large part of it, the root and the fuel of it, is collaborative funding. And to give you an example of what I really mean by that fuel is collaborative money that we got through the Giving Circle, which got us started off, was unrestricted, which meant that I could really build an organization. It was very results focused. You can't fund for result if you only fund activities. And I think that's a really important piece when we think about what are we funding. Collaborative philanthropy meant that Dasra brought a group of donors to us. So it's crazy, but Educate Girls has grown to this scale by spending just 2% on fundraising. And that means a lot for nonprofits, right? And that as funders, we want to focus on so much, saying, what's your fundraising expense? And here, because of the collaborative nature of the money that we have raised over the years that has supported us, we've been able to do it at just spending 2% on funding, on fundraising, and reporting. We do minimal reporting. So again, most of our funders, if one funder goes to the field, they update all the other funders, or the same donor report goes to the entire collaborative. So it really reduces the burden on the nonprofit and frees up their time to actually do the work and kind of scale the impact. So that's what it means to be a receiver in terms of collaborative philanthropy. But I wanted to now ask you guys really quickly, what does it mean to you?
Sure. So I think we talked earlier about the fact there's a need. Everyone in this room knows there's a significant need. And I think collaborative philanthropy allows you to achieve scale. And as Devil said just now, it allows you to take risks. I think taking risks and achieving scale is what's going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. It's a big question, but I think collaborative philanthropy for us is something that helps us make our individual philanthropy even sharper and ensures that that doesn't stay individualistic in the long run. That's what it means to us.
Arvind?
Yeah. So as a professional working in a philanthropic organization, I would think that a lot of what we see as collaborative philanthropy is around knowledge and information, which allows us to make decisions faster, which allows us to gauge risks better, and those kind of things. And especially as a young philanthropy, which is looking into new areas, new themes, it's very useful to have that kind of access.
So Amira, I'll kind of start with you. In your experience, why do you think collaborative philanthropy is important, and when?
I didn't get a chance to say good afternoon. Hi, everyone. And I think sitting here looking at this venue, I think Deval and I just shared a quick word backstage. It's overwhelmingly beautiful. And I think I feel like we're cheating on the Taj today in some way after so many years of having been there. And I think this question on why is collaborative philanthropy important, I think this is, at one level, it's a very simple question because the harder question is about the implementation of collaborative. So I'm very mindful that I have an easy question to answer here. But also, recently the article that came out in IDR, which Anant had written, had a very strong title, and that said, collaborations don't work. So I think it is a bit of a harder task to really sell the importance of collaborations. And trust me, I think we as a foundation had to do a lot of thinking to go back to the basics and figure out really why is it that collaborations are important to us. And while this topic is spoken about in great degrees of nuance and complication, I think we have really focused on going back to the drawing board, going back to the basics, and talking about the fundamental reasons as to why collaborations are important. And first and foremost, I think the most important reason is that today, collaborations have the power to create a level playing field between nonprofits and funders. And I think we should become more honest about talking about this point, because for us as a foundation, we don't receive enough pushback from our nonprofit partners. And honestly, that is compounded by the fact that funding today is demanding of scale. Funding today is demanding of sustainability. But that same funding is not really open to still looking at organizational needs, and it's not very patient capital. So then how are we expecting our nonprofit partners to actually convert the expectations that we have into the reality that does exist in the field? And I think this is the role that collaborations can play, because they provide a platform which can encourage mutual respect, mutual dialogue, and also building in costs which are at the end of the day most needed to achieve the targets that we all have. The second reason, I think, is again a very simple reason, that collaborations have the power to improve operational efficiency of this sector. And when I say operational efficiency, I'm going back to due diligence formats. I'm going back to reporting formats. I'm going back to M&E formats. And it's a very difficult task to arrive at basic standards of these reports. But that doesn't mean that the differences that exist in all the reports, as you mentioned, Safeena, doesn't put an enormous amount of inefficiencies for both, for the nonprofit side and for the funding side. And I think this is, again, where collaborations can come in if they do allow for this element of standardization. And another point, which I think somebody also mentioned in the video, that collaborations are that tool that have the power to bring ignored niche sectors to the forefront. Today, most of us are not talking about mental health. We're not talking about disability, because all these sectors are still very small, they're fragmented. And yes, we do need some element of consolidation so that the funding can be more effective. We can push our nonprofit partners to really set up good benchmarks, best practices. But talking about these niche sectors, it's important to come back to the word collaboration and remember that philanthropy is not here to serve collaborations. Collaborations at the end of the day are actually here to serve philanthropy, so let's not forget the non-mainstream sectors. And I think the final reason for us why collaborations are important is because innately, philanthropy always wants a sectoral identity. It wants a geography identity. Are you into education? Are you into health? Are you into livelihoods? Are you in this geography? Are you in that state? And there is no question about the need for convergence, because without focus, without depth, without convergence, without scale, we cannot achieve the paradigm shifts that we want to. But I think the need for that convergence takes away from the fact that we first need to have a macro perspective of the sector. And if we don't look at the different dots that do exist in the sector, together we're not going to be able to connect those dots. And that's where I think collaborative philanthropy does have a very important role to play, because you can continue in your foundation in the areas that you want, in the focus that you want, but at the same time, if you partner with collaborations, you will allow yourself the chance to experience, to learn, to observe, and therein make your individual philanthropy even more effective. So I think this was the easy part of talking about collaborations, and I am, again, very mindful that the challenges lie in implementation, but that should not take away from the fact that in this country, with this kind of diversity, it's not possible for us to do it individually.
No, thanks, Amira. That was really, really thoughtful. And I think you're right when you talk about the convergence and you talk about things that everybody, doing individual action and saying my geography, my silo versus coming together and looking at something end to end, because yes, problems are deeply complex. But also you're absolutely right in saying the challenges are really in the details, right? So with that, Arvind, if you can kind of talk a little bit about who do you partner with in philanthropy when you keep systemic change really at the heart of it, and the how of it?
Yeah, so to some extent, we've already spoken about why we would want to do it, right? In the sense, the rational arguments of reducing risk, and risk not just risk to impact in case of fuzzy problems, multi-dimensional problems where you choose a certain piece of the problem, but you need a holistic solution, and then collaboration makes a lot of sense. And then there is risk apart from risk to impact in terms of work around rights and those kind of things where there is other risk which you mitigate by coming together, right? The other thing which we would look for, and I'm talking slightly from a theoretical perspective, then the other thing which you look for is the fact that you can get diverse skill sets, you can reduce redundancies and so on. But having said that, I would probably be the skeptic in the panel right now to say that it's very difficult, because what we want at the end, the design, for it to have a design which is very, if you take the analogy of a Apple phone, the iPhone, it has to look very user-friendly for all people to come together and collaborate, but there is a lot of work that goes behind, and that sometimes doesn't take place. So it's really difficult. So one example which I look back to is where the collaborations have come from grounds up, where the implementation, the people who are on the field, so to speak, the idea comes from there, then at least one level of implementation challenges are taken care of. Typically, this model of where it comes from a broader shared goals and setting, and then bringing it down to working together, I'm a bit skeptical on those forms of philanthropy, collaborative philanthropy.
Yeah. So covering the why and the how, Aleem, do you want to throw some light on who? I mean, there are a lot of people sitting in the room saying, maybe this is for the Premjis to do, but I'm just starting out on my philanthropic journey, or this is really not going to fit with, what we do. And so could you kind of touch a little bit of, who is this for, and is it only for veteran philanthropists? Or?
Sure. So I can talk about our own journey. My wife and I, when we started a few years ago on our own philanthropic journey, we had a few options. We could have funded or built a school, and we did think about that. We could have given back to our university. But I think what really drove our decision around taking a more collaborative approach was the learning aspect. So we ended up giving money to an organization called Empower, which is a foundation which supports at-risk youth in 15 different countries globally, and in Asia supports 40 different organizations. And through the process of giving that, we were able to get involved and understand the aspects of what works, what doesn't work within an NGO. Over the course of the last few years, we visited more than 15 NGOs across several different countries, and really got to the nitty-gritty of the challenges that they face day to day. And I fundamentally believe that as we continue our journey, that learning experience we couldn't have had if we hadn't pooled our funds with other people. Right. Now, there are challenges along the way. The most obvious challenge is differences of opinion around strategy, how we give the funds, where we give the funds, which organizations. But I think someone in an earlier panel said it very well. The key to a partnership is really to not have the ego. I think if you can drop the ego, and if you can focus on trying to do better and make a difference with everyone else, I think you can achieve a lot more.
I think that ego piece is really important. Can I ask a really quick question? Is your collaborations, how long were they? Because one of the things we see is, we've got collaboratives that go 3 years to like up to 5 years. And that's a long time to, hold your ego back and kind of like work with a group of individuals. Like, I'm just trying to see, like, have you kind of encountered anything around that, and how long do you generally?
I think there are different models. I mean, Empower's model would be longer term. I think the giving circles is a great idea and something which has a defined time. I think the 10 to 19 collaborative also, in terms of defining a 3-year period initially and potentially 5 years. I think it will really vary by initiative, but I think if you want to have an impact, there is a certain minimum time frame that you need to have to try and see success. I think everything we're trying to do around philanthropy is around scale, and to do that, you have to invest for the long term.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a really important point. I mean, if you just do one-year projects, then you're not actually building any kind of long-term sustainable change. It's only education outcomes, or any of those pieces just take a much longer time. So the collaborative funding actually is a much better way to kind of look at it long-term. Can I lead into all three of you for any one key practical challenge that you've had with collaborative philanthropy, and how you sort of if any of you want to kind of touch on anything specific? Or something that went really well?
I mean, the one example which comes to mind is, it may seem very tactical, but our work in nutrition in Orissa, because we had a long-term commitment over there, so we could quickly get into a partnership with BMGF, who was working in UP and Bihar on similar lines, and then we could, there was a strong behavior change communication initiative that they were helping, so that kind of fit very easily. So that those kind of opportunities are the ones which we would look forward to, where there is clear complementarity in terms of.
Right.
I think I'll give you an example of an at-home example, which is that we're a family foundation, and as of now, my dad, my mom, my younger sister, my husband, my brother-in-law, we're all in this together. And I think that is a really tough part of collaborative philanthropy right there. But I think what it does need is for the person who is really the conductor to get even tougher about the subjectivity, because clearly everyone does have a difference of opinion, but everybody also comes in with a different level of experience and exposure. So the challenge is, how can you bring everybody to a similar level, and then let's talk across the table and see why you think differently from me. So the practical challenges of doing that, and the way we've done it so far is each person is actually responsible for a small nonprofit, a large nonprofit. They look at two completely different sectors. If you're looking at empowerment, you will also have to look at mental health. And only then do you get the entire spectrum. And that makes it easier to work through collaborative decisions.
Anything you want?
Yes, I'd say at any given collaborative, for example, at our board level, there are always going to be day-to-day disagreements and challenges, and there are also going to be differences around long-term strategy as well. So I don't think that's going to go away in any situation, but I think having an intermediary play the role of facilitating, trying to get people to work together, can always help to bridge those differences.
Yeah. I think this piece around alignment is really, really key, because if you're going to have a lot of people, and I think here, in my experience, having Dasra, when we initially started out with our giving circle, was just so good, because we actually never even saw any of that, right? We just had Dasra kind of backstop any of that, kind of what was going on behind the scenes, and doing all the work around building alignment, so that the service provider, in some ways, the NGO on the ground was never affected and impacted and could carry on the work. So I think there again, the role of the intermediary, as you said, is really key and really important in how you structure these pieces. So with that, maybe we can open it up to the audience for some questions. Hi, Tara.
I guess as we think about collaborative philanthropy and creating collaborative platforms, it's like a complex supply chain coming together. And how do you, but for that to work, it strikes me that you have to have a leader. In that collaboration, there needs to be one leader to make it work and to make it happen. How do you reconcile the two? How do you reconcile collaboration of, let's say, 20 supply chain providers, and one of those 20 takes the lead, in not only putting the plan together, but also implementing it? How do you reconcile the two?
Are you asking from the funder perspective or from the...
Across the board, whatever the platforms may be. You know, you have the funder that's collaborative. You have an intermediary like Dasra who comes in, and there's implementation. You may have, let's say, 15 NGOs to make the 10 to 19 work, for example. How, you know, in each phase, in each horizontal phase, you need a leader to drive it.
Yeah, I can start. You know, I think you're right that the role of the intermediary plays a very big role. I think upfront, setting common objectives is very clear. Everyone has to be on the same page around the defined objectives, the time frame to achieve those objectives. And I think then the baseline of data and the reporting around that. So what is required to you know, what are the KPIs to achieve each of those objectives? Getting everyone on the same page around that, to me, is key. But as you said, it's a lot of work, and so you do need someone to step up and play that role. I think if there is no intermediary in that role, then it has to be someone who's very passionate, but also very data-driven, who has to play that role.
I think I'd just like to add that maybe I would replace the word leader with a coordinator. And of course, somebody has to start the collaborative. Somebody does have to lead or conduct or coordinate the collaborative. So right up front, it's very important that the purpose of the collaborative is laid out. And as things evolve, as things change, it does come down to the communication that is made by the person who is actually directing the effort. And as a second step, I think it will take great maturity on the part of the person who, or the group that is actually conducting this collaborative, to realize that if they have a leadership mindset with the sense of, you know, the egotistical leadership that we sometimes think of, that probably will not work.
I think if, you know, whoever is conducting this collaborative, if it is possible to create case studies of outcomes which come without and outcomes which come with collaboration over a period of time, then with specific, very, very specific metrics, then it could help in creating a mindset across the board of, you know, how outcomes can be multiplied. And therefore, that would perhaps create a more collaborative mindset. I don't know what you think about that.
So, by definition, it would be difficult to have the counterfactual, right? But what I could think could work is, if we start working together small, I mean, at the end of the day, any team would work together by knowing each other's strengths and where each can come in and so on. And maybe those, if it is captured, and over a period of time, whether it's captured formally or otherwise, if it's captured, then that will allow us to scale up the collaborative over a period of time. Because we would then have a sense of who contributes what best, who can play which role best, and that's how it should emerge, rather than you know, set up the roles up front and so on.
I think you're very right. Something like an Ashoka University or Akshay Patra, as I think we were discussing yesterday, those have very tangible goals, and so it's easier to develop the systems to work towards that. But when it comes to service delivery, honing down on the metrics is a huge challenge, and we know that, you know, the Adolescent Collaborative has really struggled to fine-tune what those metrics should be. But working in a metric-based way is, in my opinion, the fastest and most effective way for a collaborative to work.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, I think if you start with the right outcome, and that outcome ideally should be the SDGs, or should be something not bespoke that we sit down and create, but something like they were saying everybody's already kind of signed on to, right? And if you start with that, then I think everything else, then you could be implementing it in a different way, but as long as all of us are sort of, we can take different pathways to that outcome, right? You can run your own school, or you can do non-formal education, or you can partner with the government. You can do a variety of activities, but as long as you're all reaching the same outcome, I think that kind of helps to bring everybody together. And then you can set up metrics around that. But having that common sort of piece that hinges, you know, the entire collaboration sort of hooks onto it, is kind of key, I guess, right?
I just wanted to add a very quick point. When we compare it to the financial markets, there is a very tangible IRR at the end of it, and that allows the entire ecosystem to work, in one direction, so as to speak. And I think we should start having conversations where we're comparing investees with grantees and what are the differences that, we work with. I think that would be an interesting panel to have.
And I think if you align it with the SDGs, then the alignment with the government becomes a lot simpler as well, right? Do we have time for another question? Hey.
Hi, my name is Priya, and I lead fundraising for ARPAN. ARPAN works, on this really niche theme of child sexual abuse, and we've been doing that for the past 11 years now. So my question is that as we grow, we've had support from various philanthropists. For example, for APPI, we're in our 3rd year of funding right now. And we've been fortunate to have philanthropists come on board to support us in this growth journey. But my question is, how do we access collaborative philanthropy? Beyond, say, just the Dasra giving circles, other avenues that we could tap into?
Yeah. So first and foremost, Arpan, I think that's fantastic work. My girls have grown up reading your books, and I think everybody in the room should fund you. I think you're just absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
And you tackle a really important cause, and you're the first ones that I also heard, like highly empathetic. They said you don't just work with children who've suffered abuse, but also with the perpetrators.
Absolutely.
Because they themselves have suffered somewhere. And to have that level of empathy and a huge heart is, I just wanted to say, you're absolutely fantastic. But yes, where should ARPAN go to access this kind of, any ideas from the panelists, apart from Dasra?
You mean more individual philanthropy, right?
So we have individual philanthropists whom we are working with, but we haven't accessed collaborative philanthropy as we are discussing.
That's the chicken or the egg question, because we therefore need many more platforms that can allow even more individuals to come together and support not just in ARPAN, but other organizations that are doing similar work as ARPAN as well. So there is a need for more platforms.
So I can understand the fact that when you work in a niche area, that complicates things, because there it is more individually referring and that kind of a pathway, because typically when you're talking about collaborative philanthropy, there is a sense of a scale of the problem which actually gets people together, right? And that is a challenge for a niche area. So it would be more individual in my opinion through, but what I can think of is the fact that we have a 3-year partnership. It is up to, it's a responsibility of any individual philanthropy also to be able to, capture that kind of a knowledge, and in some ways, pass that to others. And that I don't think we have any systematic or structured way currently to do that, and that's probably something we should be thinking about.
So Priya, what Arvind is really saying is that APPI is going to give you more money. First and foremost.
And I'm saying it's a responsibility to also get others to give, right?
And he's going to introduce you to 10 other funders, right? But you raised a very important point. I have this mental calculator. Some people think I'm a little mad. But I think I have to meet 40 people before one will give me money. And the minute I kind of close that, then my counter starts again back to 40. But you're right, it is very difficult. And I think maybe this, and I don't even have an answer to you. Where do you go and find collaborative money? It is really, for us, it's like the gold. The donors who give us that kind of money are worth their weight in gold for us. To give you unrestricted, multi-year outcomes, results-focused money is very, very rare. And therefore, they're very hard to find. So maybe one of the things for Dasra is to think, how do you make that easier and more accessible, is for nonprofits who can actually maybe get into that. We do have time for one more question, is what I'm seeing. So, yeah, do you have a mic?
How do we evaluate a collaborative action, like how we have learning outcomes being measured or mortality? Does evaluation of collaborative platforms do happen? Do we evaluate such platforms?
Well, mortality, we're all 100%.
Just the collaborative platform itself.
Yeah. So how do you measure if you have 20 nonprofits in a collaborative?
So, I mean, at an abstract level, of course, we could use the point is that the sum should be more than, if 20 people are coming together, what they can do together should be more than what individually they could come up with, right? And that, in tangible terms, it could be reducing redundancies, or very specifically, you don't have to do 20 different evaluations. All those kind of things can actually add up, and we could go about it in a systematic fashion. But overall, that would be the measure, right? That it should be more than what individually they could do.
How do you, Amira, think about metrics or evaluation? Do you use a common framework, or?
I think we're still very early stage, and we're still very shy of hard metrics for most of our portfolio organizations, but we do see a need to get there. So I think it's still early for me to answer that question.
I think there are a lot of intangibles actually around this question, right? So what are we trying to do? We're trying to achieve scale. So as Arvind said, I think, can we achieve scale by having multiple donors together? I think, the proof will come through outcomes. Can we take risks? So sometimes with risks, it will work, sometimes it won't work, but in every case, through taking that risk, the donors involved will learn from their mistakes, and hopefully that will achieve better outcomes over time. So I do think that it's an excellent question. It's not easy to, and I don't think we should set clear metrics around are we achieving it better, because the purpose of this is largely to achieve that intangible and innovate and to develop the sector further over time. But I think also Safeena mentioned earlier, and it's a very good point, it's from the NGO perspective, the value that they get from having the collaborative donations is significant. That ability to plan ahead, to not have to fundraise so much, I think that's also a key aspect of this. And again, I'm not sure if it's easy to measure or not, but that's something that allows them to develop further over time.
They're saying stop, but can we take one last question?
Hello.
If anybody has something really key that we can get Arvind to commit to more.
So it's Anna Bruni from the Confluencers. My question was building on the role of this collaborator that is going to moderate the relationship. And I was just wondering, does it necessarily have to be a person, or could it be a new form of contract? So taking a page from the built environment sector, there are specific contracts that help to moderate change and align interests, both from a financial perspective and from an M&E perspective. So could this role be done by a new contract as well as a person?
You're saying whether it can be done by a person or by a contract?
A contract. So could this role of moderating these difficult relationships and partnerships be fulfilled by a new type of contract, a new best practice contract of how this relationship needs to play out and how change is managed, how risk is managed, as it is done in other sectors? Or does it always need a person?
Safeena, how would you view a DIB in this context?
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. I was like, oh my God, yeah. I think it does need, because there are people and so many parties involved that you need someone to coordinate, to get everybody, to get them on the same page. But I think all of that gets coded in the contract. So I don't think you can do one without the other. I mean, you need the contract, but to bring people and to align them, because there is a lot of alignment that needs to happen, right? It's not, and like I said, we do them for 3 to 5 years. And so at least for the DIB, we started about 1 year in advance, getting everybody together. So I think it does need an organization like a DASRA or some other intermediary that helps to put it all together and gets everybody buy into that common framework, and then it has to be in the contract, because that's what bakes it, and you can not have disputes and all the rest of it. But thank you so much for the panelists, and thank you guys for all your great questions, and I think lunch is ready.